In Module 3, we're going to talk about cells. Cells are the smallest unit of life, and you're going to learn that there are two different types of cells, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And we're going to look at mostly prokaryotes this time, but we're going to touch on eukaryotes because it's important to know about the differences between the two. It's very important that they are different in size, so that's one of the big things we're going to be talking about. And then we're going to talk about the parts of the body. We're gonna kind of go back to, everything's made from molecules. Then your body is made from cells, but every one of those cells is alive, and you've got thousands of them. They all have to eat. Every one of them needs energy. Every one of them has waste products. Everything one of them needs to be taken care of. And the question is, how does that happen? And it turns out red blood cells have a huge part in that. And I'm going to have you look a little bit back at the PBS video at some of the clips from there that may help you understand what's important. Fuel, the brain-gut connection. Um, so the chapters we're going to read are chapters 4 and 5. Chapter 4 and 5 talk about the cell parts first, and then we're going to talk about the concepts of osmoregulation and how the cell maintains its balance. Because if you think back to the characteristics of life, being able to maintain a stable environment was part of what makes you living. And since cells are living, that's got to be one of the things they're going to do. And that's what we're going to talk about. So your assignments in the first part are going to be to read chapter 4 and 5, do the sample questions, do the mastering biology. Then these two are more fun. The Harvard Cell video is just beautiful. The Amoeba Sisters video, it'll help you with the osmosis part. Then you've got a study aid document with specific instructions again. There's a virtual osmosis activity that will help you figure out how osmosis works. Then an experiment to help you figure out how osmosis works. And then finally, we're going to do osmosis in action as a quiz. Once you got a passing grade, I think 9 points or so on chapter 5, you then have access to part 2 of the assignments. And in part 2 of the assignments, we're going to apply. We're going to apply what we've learned. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the different cells in your body as they actually exist in your body. So we've introduced a generic cell. We've introduced some mechanisms, some themes, and let's see what you can already put together. Now, I imagine I expect you to struggle with this, and that's okay. Do the best you can. I don't expect you to necessarily get this right. Remember, we're going to talk about learning and growth. So if you get this wrong initially, that's okay. We'll talk about it, and hopefully you'll get it right at the end. So having the questions is not a bad thing. Lecture and info, as usually, you click here. You have a tour guide again, and again, the tour guide gives you a bit of an idea. So the tour guide, I haven't really focused on it too much in the earlier chapters, but the tour guide goes through the book and I make comments to the different things about how important they are and what the basic things are you need to remember. So start looking at the tour guide. Tour guide will also tell you about the things that are not so important. So especially in sections where I'm asking you to read 5 chapters and you're going, oh my lord, do I have to really read all the 5 chapters? Look at the tour guide. I may tell you that you don't have to read any part of chapter 3 except for like just one little section. So look at the tour guide to see, because it'll narrow things down for you. Um, and here's the tour guide. Chapter 4 lecture. I'm letting Hank do the lecture for Chapter 5. There's a osmosis demo here. Then you've got the book. Demonstrations this time. This video is it's just beautiful. And this is really, this really looks like what it looks like in your cell. Those are the shapes that the molecules have, as best as we know. If you're struggling with osmosis and water potential, watch this. It'll help you a lot with one of the homework assignments. So specifically this homework assignment. So if you're struggling with this homework assignment, that video is going to be helpful. The assignments again are here: chapters, sample questions, the Harvard video, and the Amoeba Sisters. Study aid, you know how to do those by now. Note that there are specific instructions here. The osmosis activity, which is a virtual activity, an experiment with osmosis to help you learn what osmosis is, and then the quiz that I just mentioned. Let me see if there's anything specific I need to tell you about any of these. Chapter 4, that's clear what that is. Chapter 5, that's clear what that is. Study aid, let's look at that real quick. So here is I'm asking you to draw things for osmosis. And so think about these things. It's mostly just, think about these things. What do you know? There's not necessarily a right answer here. It's more of me wanting to know what you already know. So that's the study aid part. And then what else we got here? Hang on, let me go find this here. So that's your study aid part. Then we've got osmosis in action, which is that assignment with that I just showed you. That goes along with the story. And then last but not least, for part 1 is the diffusion osmosis board, where you're doing an experiment. Now, the best experiment of the bunch, it's the one that takes the longest, but it really is by far the most impressive, is the osmosis using an egg as a model. What you do there is you start out, you spend about 3 days removing the shell, just the hard shell from an egg, and then you use what's left over, not the shell. The shell part is just removing of the shell. But when you have that, when the shell is removed, then you can use the egg as a model of osmosis, and it is amazing how it changes size just depending on what you put it in. It's a fun experiment to do. And I want you to post a picture of your experiment and explain what it is you did, what it is you saw, and how it relates to osmosis. Then before you go to part 2, in part 2, we're going to look at, there are a couple of videos from the fuel site, from the pulse, to remind you back at the function of the cells in the human body and what needs to happen so that a human body can be alive. And this is what we're going to do here now, because we're going to look at the function of the human body and how it relates to the things that you've already learned before. Now, I imagine you're going to struggle with these assignments more than you've struggled with any of them before, and that's okay. Do the best you can. Give me what you've got. So what I want you to do here is I want you to look at cells, what they look like, and what that means about their function. So the cell specialization quiz, I want you to compare a cell, a generic cell, which is in the book, to a real cell. You've all seen pictures of nerve cells, red blood cells, muscle cells. They don't look like generic cells. They don't look like that eukaryotic cell that you have in the book. Why not? So that's what I want you to think and talk about. You're not going to find those answers necessarily anywhere. I want you to think about those. What do those cells try to do, and what makes them best at what they do? Then we get to the themes in biology board, and your cell specialization is bad. Themes in biology board is even worse, because there I want you to go and look at Unit 5 in the textbook and look back at the themes. Evolution, flow of information, structure and function, life depends on transfer and energy of matter, and interaction between systems. So look at where this is happening. Where do you see evidence of evolution? Where do you see evidence of the relation of structure and function? And where do you see transfer of energy and matter in Unit 5? In Unit 5, we're going to talk about digestion, gas exchange, circulation, body temperature. It's where the cells do what they do in your body. And I want you to look at how they're doing that. I want you to tell me what chapter you chose. So these are the chapters you get to choose from. What themes do you see evidence for? How is this evidence for that theme? And what's the most striking things you learned in that chapter that you chose? What was the thing that was the most interesting that you learned? Now, most of you, I suspect, are going to struggle with this. And because I suspect that most of you are going to struggle with this, I'm going to let you play with ChatGPT legitimately in class. So think about what the AI is for a second before you do that, though. So the AI is not a really smart friend. The AI is basically a politician. It tells you what you want to hear. It knows a lot, but its logical thinking isn't all that great. And it basically just wants you to believe that it knows all the things, when in reality, it may not. So you got to look at what the AI tells you with a very critical eye, because it sometimes gets things backwards. But sometimes it's actually quite good. So play with it. See what answers it gave you to, I don't know, the diet plan assignment, or any others. Ask the ag, I mean, not for biology class, don't ask the AI for biology class to go on vacation, but you can take the AI and ask it to find the best vacation to go to if you want to have an average temperature of 35 degrees or something. It could possibly find you something like that. But play with it, see, and then answer a couple of questions for it. And I think that's basically all I had for this week. Um, Hopefully you'll have some fun with the exploration part of this activity. Like I said, there's not going to be much memorization here in part two. Part two is going to be trying to apply what you've learned, and that's not going to be easy. Last but not least, the optional material, and there's nothing you have to do. It's just a little video about the guy who was the first person to actually see life under the microscope. And his story is an amazing story because he was not a scientist. He was a layman who just invented a microscope and was just really curious and started looking at things. And then lo and behold, saw life, and then tried to explain to people that he did, in fact, see things that were living under his microscope, um, to people that didn't really know about microscopes yet or anything, didn't believe anything that they couldn't see. And yeah, so his is a very interesting and fascinating story. So again, I hope you'll have some fun with this. And that's all I got for you this week.